is called that because that's where they're based. So Bethesda, some of the East Coast has developers, but like I said, they sort of struggle a little bit because they are so remote. Outside of the country, you've got Vancouver. There's a game and film school up in Vancouver. I think one of the BioWare studios is actually up in Vancouver. They're definitely in Canada. I don't remember if it's Vancouver. Edmonton? Okay. That sounds right, yeah. But sometimes you will actually be able to get those jobs because they basically set up a visa on the basis of whether or not your work is something that is important enough to bring someone across country borders for. Ready at Dawn actually has a very diverse set of workers that they bring in people from all over the world. I don't know how many countries exactly, but it's dozens of countries, and they bring people in specifically to work on the teams because they're the best at what they do. Other questions?
Something I've always been curious about, and feel free to not answer if you're not comfortable doing so. Do you feel you've been properly compensated for your crunch time?
On Halo 4, I definitely would say that I was. I was a contractor on that project, so I was actually receiving overtime for whatever hours that I worked. I was so enthusiastic about it that they actually had to cap my overtime so that I wasn't costing them too much money. I would say it's difficult to really say. It's going to be up to each individual person. For me, the salary wasn't really the point of it. The point of it was that I don't know what else I would be doing. I wouldn't be happy doing anything else. And but to speak specifically to what you're asking, you can find some of this information on Game Career Guide, Gama Sutra. They put out the Game Development Magazine, which has a yearly salary update, so you can get a sense of how much you'll be making. I want to say the average for a game designer with 3 to 5 years is somewhere in the $65,000 a year range with benefits. Programmers generally make a bit more, 70 to up to 100, depending on if they're just like a gameplay programmer or if they've been moved up to senior or lead or tools. Artists, I want to say, are in the probably 50 to 60 range starting out. So it's depending on the work that you're doing, you may not be making a lot of bank. You may not be putting away a lot. But I've always found that the salary is acceptable and often a little bit negotiable. When I was moving up to Seattle for 343, I asked, you should always ask these questions, even if you have no expectation of getting an answer that you would be happy with. But I asked, I'm going to be a contractor, I'm going to be moving up, do you have any sort of relocation expenses? And while 343, which is part of Microsoft, would do that, since I was a contractor and was technically working through a different company, they said, no, we don't really have that, but let me go ask and see if maybe we can bump your salary a little bit for that. And so they did. They actually bumped my yearly salary up several $1,000s just because I needed to be able to cover moving expenses and stuff. So realistically, it comes down to a lot of knowing what you're worth, knowing what your time is worth, and I've got a friend, for example, he's got the same amount of experience as I do, but he has moved up from mobile design into combat design, systems design, things like that. And so as he's looking around for a job, he might get an offer, but they kind of lowball. They want to get as much work for as little payment as possible just because they're businesses. And he said, can you do anything for me? And between the nature of the company and it was an MMO company, and as you may know, some MMO companies have shut down recently, so it sort of flooded the market with applicants. He said, I'd like to work for you. can you bump that up 5 or 10,000? And they said no. And so you just have to kind of know your own worth and know what to ask for, and knowing what the averages are is a big help in that. One thing specifically that I'll say is that the cost of living in these areas is definitely higher than Arkansas, so factor that in. Look up a cost of living chart online. And I know one developer who is a level designer, who was going to be he was offered a job at Crystal Dynamics, which is located around San Francisco, and they gave him the average, a little bit under the average salary, or the average salary, somewhere in there, and he said, well, this is barely going to be enough to live on. Is this job good enough? Is it going to support me? Is it going to give me somewhere to go after that if I ever leave? That he had to make that choice for himself. So it can be a little bit of a balancing act, and a little bit of, do I need to put off saving extra cash for a home for a while? I've known people who even just get roommates just to cut down on costs. So especially when you're starting out, it can be a little, the salaries can be a little rough, but I've always found them to be pretty fair. There was another question right here.
Someone who is graduating in about May, what would be the best time to start applying? Would it be around spring, or would it be okay to start applying now to get them sure they don't want to go through the bother of interviewing someone that they're not going to be able to work for 7 months?
Sure, that's a great question. The simple answer is start now. Obviously there's a certain extent to which, I went to GDC 2 or 3 years before I graduated. You're going to hand resumes to people, and they're going to say, well, when are you available? And you're going to get, well, not for a while. But the more that they know you, the more time that you have to be in contact with companies, the better. What will often happen if you don't just put it in your cover letter, which is a great thing to do, is they'll ask, what's your availability? They'll often ask things like, are you okay with moving to Southern California? Things like that. Generally the HR people, which are often the people that you'll be talking to when applying, they are people persons. They want to help. They want to know what your needs are and see if they can work with that. So I would say, put feelers out, contact companies that you're really excited about, let them know when you'll be graduating, let them know what your availability is after that. If you need to take some time off before coming into the company, that's sometimes fine. At Ready at Dawn, we would have people who would accept an offer, but to start 2 or 3 months later. Because they might have to wrap up affairs, they might have to finish up things that they're working on. You may have a thesis project that runs over, something like that. So, but yeah, I would say start as soon as possible, making those connections, and then around the time of GDC, then if you can attend it, great. If you can't, know that's when they really start thinking about it. That's when it's on their minds, and so that's a really great time to actually start expanding and hitting whichever companies you possibly can. So there was another question.
What kind of connections do you see between the gaming industry and the digital arts and movies? Now, does talent go back and forth, or similar skills?
There are definitely similar skills, especially for artists. I kind of get the sense that that's a lot of what you're asking. A lot of times artists can either continue the work that they were doing. I know someone who was a CGI artist for films, who then transitioned into doing cinematics for first a company called Blur, and then a company, then Blizzard. She works at Blizzard working on their cinematics, which are top notch, right? So there's always the possibility that they might need whatever skill set you have. As far as sort of flexibility and moving back and forth, definitely a lot of the same principles apply, whichever type of work you're doing, but it is definitely important to know that there are differences, right? Render time is a big deal. Polygon count is a big deal. And so if somebody comes from a CG background, they might not be used to those restrictions, and they might not know how to work with those. So one of the things, if you were to put together a portfolio, is showing, okay, here's the high-res model I created. Here's how I deconstructed it down to something that's runnable in a game, 20,000 polygons or whatever. So there are some of those little caveats, but you should be able to find information about those. People will tell you about those if you do a portfolio review, and really it'll be up to the company to understand. If you're being open with them and you're communicating with them, they will understand, well, this guy is going to do high poly. For example, on Uncharted, I know somebody who's a high poly modeler, and they actually hire someone to take his stuff and pull it down to the point where it's runs in the engine. So really it's about what your applicable skills are, and that applies to any job, any game job. If you're a programmer but you've never worked in games, well, you'll have to start understanding things like runtime costs and getting rid of for loops and things like that. So it's, like I said, it's really about the skills that you bring. And for example, one thing for me, like I worked on Unreal. I learned Unreal when I was doing my applications, but maybe the company I was going to work for wasn't going to use Unreal. But the fact that I was comfortable with a 3D engine, and I was comfortable with the idea of static meshes and dynamic meshes, and those sorts of qualities, those sorts of abilities will apply back and forth. So it's really up to you to be able to say, I know what your needs are. This is how I meet them if I haven't met them already. Other questions? In the back?
Are you still on?
All the way in the back. Let's sit there. Sorry about that.
Like having to specify which type of designer you are.
Mhm.
What's the best way to find out what those kind of subcategories are, and which one is the best to advertise yourself as?
Let me start with the second question. Which one to advertise yourself as depends really on what you're looking for and what your skills are. Like I said, I've been doing level design for 5 years. I'm okay at it. I'm pretty good. I think that my systems design skills are probably at least as good. System design is saying, this is how the combat will work. This is how, if you have a character, this is how he should move. This is how he steps on things. This is how he interacts with the world. Those sorts of things. So really knowing yourself and knowing your skills and reading the job postings and just making sure that things match up. What was the first question again?
It was just kind of like how to get a feel for what the
Right.
other subcategories are.
A great way to do it, like I said before, is the Game Developer magazine. I believe, I know it's free to people in the industry, so you might be able to sign up for it free as a student of game design, things like that. You definitely get a free subscription if you go to GDC. But like I said, they have a yearly thing that breaks down, these are the different categories and these are how much they make, and so that's going to be a great way. Another great way, there's a site called mobygames.com, M-O-B-Y. This is it's sort of a Wikipedia, so it's not game companies doing it, it's independent individuals putting this information up, but it is just credits. It is just credits for any game that you could possibly think of, who worked on it. You can click on the names and it'll show all the different things that they've worked on. So find a game that you love, find a game that's the kind of thing that you might want to work on, or that a company that you work for might be doing, and just read through it, because you'll see how much some companies don't even make distinctions. Naughty Dog, the company that does Uncharted, they kind of just have designers. They kind of just have, they don't even make that much of a distinction between managers and lead designers, senior designers, and the guys down at the bottom. And that's their company culture. It's just that they have designers, they have programmers. But most companies will have, like at 343, I was an encounter designer. So you'd be able to look at the credits of Halo 4, and it would say, designers, level designers, encounter designers, scripters. And so that's going to be a really great resource for finding out, exactly, oh man, I saw this, and that sounds like what I want to do. And then, like I said, you can also hopefully use some of that information. Maybe you're not quite sure, or you see a description that maybe, you see a title that maybe you don't know what the description is. You might be able to just contact somebody in the industry and just say, I don't know what a scripter is. Can you give me some pointers on what that job description is? And people in the industry tend to be a little insular. They tend to not talk outside of the industry as much as they should, but they're all individuals. If you're not asking for a whole lot of their time, they'll probably be able to answer whatever questions you've got. You had a question.
I was curious how useful graduate degrees are.
Okay. This is a topic that I covered in the presentation that I did years ago, that has actually changed a little bit. At the time, there were a lot of game studios coming up. I'll get to the graduate specific question in a minute. There are a lot of game universities, game schools starting up, and it was kind of hard to tell which ones were reputable and which ones weren't. Things like Full Sail, DigiPen, USC, and University of Southern California has one. There's one called the Entertainment Technology Center, the ETC, oh man, I just blanked out on where that is. It's somewhere up in Iowa, I think. So there are these schools, but it really wasn't clear which ones of them were reputable and which ones weren't. You may have seen, I forget what the ad is, but there's a TV ad where the guy is gonna do design and let's tighten up the graphics on level 3, and no one says that. We make fun of that. So you definitely have to look at the degree itself and understand whether or not it's going to be useful. I heard it said once at GDC, I think it was Will Wright said, there are only 2 game schools that I hire anyone from. I'm not going to say, he said, I'm not going to say which 2 they are, but you probably know. And I'm guessing he was talking about the Entertainment Technology Center run by a guy named Jesse Schell, and probably the USC program. So you can look at like the sort of work that the schools put out and where they get hired. You should always ask before you sign up for a program where where have you placed people. As far as graduate work, someone actually asked me this, and so I asked my boss. I had a pretty good sense, but I wanted to get my boss's input since he's been in the industry a lot longer than I have. They're kind of not necessary, graduate degrees. They definitely want you to have a university bachelor's of some sort that shows that you'll have some communication skills. You'll have probably worked on projects. You'll be able to finish things. You've completed a four-year degree usually. Graduate degrees aren't necessarily as useful. This is the important thing. They're not necessarily as useful as industry experience. People aren't more likely to hire you because you've got a graduate degree. So while there are definitely important things that you can learn, they may not be applicable to each company, and job experience is. The reason, I meant to mention this earlier, the reason that job applications will say must have shipped one game is that in the last 3 to 5 months of a project, crazy stuff will happen, and you just have to be able to manage that. You have to be able to manage the hours. You have to be able to manage, okay, well, we need to cut this because it's just not going to happen. What do we fill it with? Or how do we, if it's a level and we've got this and this and this, and we cut out this one, how do we stitch these two together? And just like I said, crazy stuff will happen, and so they want you to have that experience and know how a project is run, know how to fix bugs, how to identify bugs, how to write bugs. That's what they're really going to be looking for. So graduate degrees are great, and especially if the job market isn't doing so well as it's kind of really not right now. You kind of have to judge based on what you're finding, who you're trying to apply for, but the general consensus is that they're not as useful as a couple of years of experience. Okay. Do we have one more question? Anyone want to off?
I'll pitch mine. So I'm probably not going to work in the game design part of the industry. I'm more interested in working with the publisher side.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for someone like myself who's interested in working in the publisher side of the video game industry?
Okay. So the question is, just to make sure everybody heard it, what can I say about if you want to work for a publisher? The two most important things are you have to be familiar with the processes and programs that publishers are going to use. Publishers and producers in particular deal a lot with the bug tracking. They deal a lot with schedule management. So although I'm not too familiar with what kinds of programs might be used for schedule management, you can find them. They're out there. Probably a lot of them are easy enough to get your hands on and get practice with. The other thing is that publishers have to be very good at communication, because a lot of the times they'll be working with a developer who will be in another country. If you're working with somebody who's in another location, that'll generally mean fairly frequent flights to the studio to look at what they're doing, to make sure that they're not lying to you. And just because you sort of get a better sense of where everything is going and what more needs to be done if you're in the space with them and you're looking over shoulders and things like that. Also have to be able to similarly, they have to know how to communicate with different teams. If it is the opinion of your boss at the publisher that the art quality in a certain area needs to be brought up, you have to be able to that and communicate with the art team and work with them. So it's really about getting along with people, making connections within the industry. The most connected people, the people that have the broadest sense of people from different backgrounds always have to be the publishers and the producers, because the company might need a particular to be able to judge their previous work is what you have to be able to about milestones and what needs to be judged in a milestone. So thank you all for coming. if you have any additional questions, I'll be I'll try and for a little bit, but feel free to come up and get a business card. I've got plenty of them. Like I said, you can find my email address and just send me a question. Here's my resume. Here's my website. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
And guys, thank you again, Quentin, for doing this for us and speaking.
My pleasure.
To the university students. If you guys are not familiar, this is put on by Razorback Gaming and Game Design. We're a student organization that started last year, both gaming events on campus and game development. We have weekly or bi-weekly game design sessions in which we're learning how to develop games in Unity. If you want more information about us, check us out on Facebook.
I wouldn't know which level.
That was
The only time, like,
I had actually not seen. I knew that they were going to be in the next game, and so like they had talked about, well, we're turning infection blood because they're trying to contextualize everything. But up until that was released, I had never seen that.
was that after you left?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of stuff like I had never. I didn't know about that. So
Surprises.
yeah.
I'll let you talk to other people, since I haven't talked to you before.